Hello FTM Transtastic, my name is Luke, and this week's topic is dealing with an increased sex drive as a result of tea. I'm sorry, it's really loud, there's construction going on next door, but there's literally no other time for me to film this video, so that we're just gonna have to deal with that, and hopefully it's not too bad at the moment. I've tried to kind of time it so it's sort of in the middle of their lunch break. But wait, stop chewing my pencils. I also apologize for not filming the past 2 days. As you can tell, even with my throat and my voice, I've been sick. I was fine, and then literally overnight it just came over me and I just felt awful and ended up having a fever, and I was like in bed, I couldn't do anything, I was hopeless, and even now, like, it's been about a week and a half since I'm still sniffly, so that's not great. Anyway, this week's topic is dealing with increased sex drive. The first thing to realize is that any changes to sex drive are incredibly normal. Like, if you think about it, testosterone is a hormone that is historically known to increase libido. So increasing your testosterone levels is going to increase libido. And libido, for those who don't know, is sex drive. Teenage assigned male at birth people, when they go through puberty, generally they have an increased sex drive as well. That's just sort of something that happens, but it can be really weird to navigate that situation if you're older. I started T when I was still 18, so because of that, I was still sort of in my teenage age when I started hormones. So it wasn't really weird for me to go on hormones. Like, I didn't really feel out of place with an increased sex drive, because I kind of felt like that was normal for people my age, because I was just sort of a late bloomer, if that makes sense. Whereas I understand that if you're, like, you know, older, if you're in like your 30s or 40s, it can be really weird to go from a situation where we're in this sort of like teenage sex drive rage, and it feels out of place and it feels weird. But I think the best thing to realize with that is that it's temporary. It's definitely something that goes down over time, and it's something that happens to everyone, and it's not your fault that it's happened later for you. Yeah, there isn't really much to say about this topic. For me, my sex drive increased, but I think also I felt a lot more comfortable in who I was, so I was more able to express my sexuality, if that makes sense. Like, before hormones, I didn't really like to even really think about anything like that, and I felt guilty about that, and like, I don't know if part of that is just growing up in a society where if you're female, sex isn't something you can talk about or anything like that. So I always felt really weird talking about that or thinking about that, and I kind of had this sort of inbred shame that I don't think I would have had if I was assigned male at birth, because there's not really that shame associated with sex in people who are assigned male at birth than there are with people who are assigned female at birth. But I reckon once I started hormones, I feel like that shame almost went away, because to myself, I saw myself as more male than I was pre-T. And like, when I say that, I only mean for myself. I don't see anyone who's pre-T any less male. And I've mentioned this in like the internalized transphobia video. I think I'll link it down below if I find it. I can't remember exactly which video I talked about. The concept of how I view myself is very different to how I view other trans people. I'm really hypocritical in that sense, in that I feel like, for me, being on T affirmed my gender as being male, and made me feel like I was more male than I was pre-T, and because of that, I felt more comfortable expressing sexuality, and therefore was more comfortable with the fact that I had an increased sex drive, and therefore that probably contributed to me having an increased sex drive, because I felt more comfortable with having a sex drive because I felt like it was more appropriate because I was male, if that makes sense. That sounds really problematic. I'm not saying that that's a good way to think. I definitely don't think it is. Women and non-binary people can also have an increased sex drive. Sex drive isn't determined on gender or anything like that. And even sex, as in like biological sex, everyone's body is different, everyone responds to hormones differently, everyone has different needs and wants sexually, so it's not really a good idea to like contribute it to gender. I know that logically, but for some reason, how I felt about myself didn't quite get the logical memo. I don't know, it's weird. I don't know if other people feel that way. Has anyone else felt that way, or is it just me being like a super problematic piece of shit? I don't know. I don't feel that way now. I started hormones like 3.5 years ago, so like, I was a very different person back then, and how I viewed everything was very different back then. But I don't know, I guess that's sort of how I felt about sex. Oh my god, the construction's really annoying me. I'm just gonna wrap this video up because I don't really have too much more to say. I always feel a bit weird talking about stuff like this on the internet just because it's so public, and I don't know, like, not that it's like taboo or that it's bad to talk about sex, but I don't know, I just always feel a bit anxious about it. So sorry if I seem a little bit off in this video. I just feel a bit weird talking about this, and this is probably the very first video I've actually properly talked about it, because I usually avoid it or just don't talk about it because it makes me uncomfortable. I'm not sure if that really helps, but I guess probably the best advice I can give is just give it time. Like, it takes time, it goes down down eventually. Like I reckon for me the first like 3 months were probably the worst, and then after about 6 months it was pretty normal. I would say at no point it was unmanageable. Like I don't really understand the, you know, you go on hormones and you're like just the sex fiend and you can't control yourself and all you want to do is like have sex. That's not how I felt. I don't know if other people feel that way. If you do, like, speak to a doctor. There might be other factors contributing to that. It might not necessarily just be hormones. Anyway, I will see you guys next week. Bye.